Hello and welcome to part 4 of the R1300 GS series. Now today is actually quite a sad day. I didn't think I was going to feel like this today. Tomorrow morning, Saturday, the bike is being collected by the press office and I find myself feeling a bit sad because it's going back, and I really wasn't expecting that at the beginning of my time with this bike. So what started out as a 2-week period ended up being 3 weeks. So thank you very much to the press office for organising that for me. So what are we going to cover today? So far in this little series, we did the comparison between the 1250 and the 1300. That was part 1. Part 2 was all about suspension, this new Evo telelever setup and the Evo paralever on the rear. It is an incredibly capable and very accomplished setup. And then in part 3, we talked all about comfort. So today I thought I would just wrap things up with talking about the other end of the scale, the dynamic capabilities that this bike has. But first, the one thing, when people ask me, what is it like to ride? It is such a simple, easy, controllable bike to ride at just about any speed. And for riders of all abilities, all weights and sizes, male or female, it is such an easy bike to ride. And if you're thinking of changing bikes and you're perhaps in the middleweight sector, you really don't need to be worried about the size of this bike, because it is so nimble on its feet. It really does feel like a bike from a smaller category, but it's not. So I've took lots of footage over the last 3 weeks, helmet cam, 360 camera, and to be honest, most of it I just can't put on the channel because of the speed at which you can ride this motorbike without any real effort. It is really quite incredible. So I've been thinking hard for this last couple of days to try and find a way to share with you some of the dynamic capabilities of this bike compared to the outgoing 1250. This is the only way I could think of, without putting footage up that I shouldn't have up there, to demonstrate just how easy this bike is to ride quickly and how you can do that in complete comfort and control with the systems on the bike. So I think the place to start for me really is when we're all young, we're all in about speed. I know I was when I was younger. As fast as we could, as quick as we could go, that was what we were into. And then as we get older, we need to slow down a little bit. But I found really from around 2017 onwards, when I first got the Multistrada, that I found a new love and passion for motorcycling, in particular in the corners. Corner entry, corner exit, perfecting my lines. And really these days I'm not interested in going that fast. I mean, I did all that when I was younger, and I'm sure many of you have too. For me now, it's all about cornering, perfecting those lines and having those lovely sensations and feelings when we're out riding with friends or we're by ourselves and we just hit that perfect line on our motorbike. Now this thing is so capable at doing that, and you just don't need to try. So in a moment, I'm going to put up a couple of screenshots from the BMW connected app. Now, if you've got a BMW, you'll know what the app is. It records your maximum speed, your fuel economy, how much acceleration you've used, the braking force using the braking system, and of course, lean angles. So up here on this side up here is a screenshot. Bear in mind, this is from the very first evening. I think it was April the 14th. The very first evening I went out on this bike, and my intention on that evening was just to do a nice simple ride. I did about 170 kilometers just to get used to the bike. I didn't have any camera strapped on me, nothing on the bike, and I just wanted to get used to it, get some bum time on the bike to see what it was like. And after about an hour, I started off in ride mode road, suspension mode road, took it fairly nice and simple, nice and easy, just to get used to the bike, spend a couple of days before I start making some videos and talking about how I experienced the bike. But after about an hour, I decided to put it into dynamic mode. That's the ride mode, put the suspension mode into dynamic, and I cut across country and I went to one of my favorite sets of bends. Lovely bends, lovely road conditions, lots of visibility, so you can go at a reasonable pace in relative safety. And what I found, I didn't find this out until I got back, but on this bike, first evening, 48 degrees of lean left and right. And that is without any trying. That was no effort. And I wasn't even thinking about trying to go fast around corners. It was just so stable, so secure, and it's a completely different sensation to the old 1250. So to give you some sort of comparison between the two, on my 1250, I have in fact seen 50 degrees of lean on the left hand side on one particular series of bends, which is quite close to home. But to do that, I actually have to really pay attention, because you can't feel on the 1250, you can't feel an awful lot with what's going on between the tyre and the tarmac. And for me, I like to feel what's going on with that front end. The back can get all a bit loosey-goosey. I'm not too worried about the rear, but the front, I really need to feel what's going on. So to do that, and I'll put a screenshot up of that from the 1250, I have to really pay attention to the way I'm riding. And it is sometimes at those sorts of lean angles quite hard, for me at least, I know there are going to be much better riders than me, to control my line in corners. Now, I'm sure all of you have got your favourite set of bends, and there is one particular bend that's quite close to me here at home, and our bike club use it as well. And it is a right little tricky bend. It's an uphill, left-hander, off camber, so the camber of the road's not flat, it's actually going away from the corner, so you have to pay attention. It's a double apex, and right in the middle of that double apex there's this little undulation on the road which catches a lot of people out, and there are unfortunately some accidents on that corner. But it is a good corner for finding out about dynamics on a motorbike, because you have to be very precise with your lines. Now, for that particular corner, I have to pay attention, and I've ridden it hundreds, if not thousands of times on my 1250. But on this bike, on that first evening, I nailed it first time without any real effort. It is so easy that the bike is almost like, it's almost like a telepathic communication between you and the bike. All those little tiny subtle inputs that we as riders put into our bike to control it in the corner, a little bit of inside bar pressure, maybe we move our weighting over to the inside peg just to get the bike to lean over, or a little correction mid-corner, just moving some of that weight to the inside peg. All these subtle changes, whereas on the 1250 I have to really pay attention. On the 1300 it is a doddle, and the bike just seems to know exactly what I want to do, and it responds brilliantly, and it has been just so much fun. And I think that's probably why I'm a bit sad that the bike's going back tomorrow. And then when we think about the bike as a whole, with all this new technology, the new suspension I've really enjoyed. And actually one thing with regards to the suspension, out of these 3 weeks, there is one suspension setting that I've had the most fun with, and it might surprise you. So in ride mode, I use ride mode dynamic. In suspension mode, I use the road mode, but then I go into DSA, and where I showed you on that previous video, you can alter your compression and rebound. I turn the compression and rebound to +2 onto the maximum, and I actually really enjoy the way this bike feels running on the standard springs. So what do I mean? So in the episode where I explained about the new features of the new Evo suspension, where this bike is capable, when you move into the dynamic mode, there's a little sensor on the bike, and it opens a valve and it activates a second pair of springs, which brings 20% firmer spring rate to the motorbike, and it gives you a completely different ride, and it turns it into a sports bike. And that's really good, and I do enjoy that. And when the speeds pick up, that is the mode to be in. But on the type of roads I normally ride, I actually have really enjoyed the way the bike rides on the standard springs with that compression and rebound set to +2 in ride mode dynamic, and I have had so much fun. That has been my favorite mode. But I think you just have to get used to the bike. You just have to have a play with all 7 of those ride modes, the 3 different suspension modes, and then go into that DSA and make those changes and find the perfect setting for you, because it is so capable. That the dynamic range, I can't express this enough, is huge to take care of a lot of different riders with different requirements, different speed requirements, 1 up, 2 up, 2 up with luggage. It really is a lovely place to be. And at the flick of a switch, we've gone from 26 degrees in the sunshine in the garden to last night I think was -14, and it's currently -7, so I'm not sure how long the battery's going to last on the camera today. So I decided to refilm this section because I'm going to give you some hints and tips and some settings for your motorbikes. Now, coming up in a few minutes, I'm going to put slides up on the screen. I'll only put them up for a couple of seconds, but there'll be lots of them. You just need to pause the video and perhaps take your phone, take a picture, and then try those settings on your motorbike. So they'll be coming up in a moment. But first, there's a couple of things I really want to help you understand so that you get the best from your new R1300 GS or your GSA. Now, if your bike has 7 ride modes and you've got DSA, dynamic suspension adjustment, your bike will have variable spring rates. Now, it's important to understand that variable spring rates are linked to the suspension. So as I go through this bit, up here, I'm going to be talking about ride modes. Over here, I'm going to be talking about suspension modes. Now, they are connected. There is a handshake that takes place between these two modes, and the control goes to the ride modes. But with regards to that variable spring rate, the control actually goes to the suspension mode and not the ride modes. So let me explain that in a bit more detail. So over here, if you're in ride mode road, automatically the system automatically selects suspension mode road to go with it, and because you're in suspension mode, the bike runs on those standard springs, those big white springs front and rear, and I'll put some pictures up so that you can see. But if over here you change to ride mode dynamic, the system automatically changes in terms of suspension to the dynamic suspension mode, and because you've chosen the dynamic suspension mode, then that additional spring rate is activated via a valve, which gives you an additional 20% in terms of spring rate, and it just basically firms the whole bike up. And along with it, the algorithms also change the compression, the rebound, and it makes the bike much more controlled in those faster corners where there's lots of transitions. Now, this is great, but there are times when actually you want a different suspension mode. So let me explain. So if you're in, the first thing to do is always set your ride mode first, not your suspension mode, because the ride modes control the suspension modes. So if you go in and set your suspension mode up first, and then you make a change to your ride mode, then it's automatically going to change your suspension. So you need to do it this way first. So if you select dynamic mode, in terms of the ride mode over here first, the system automatically puts the bike into the dynamic suspension mode with that additional spring rate, which is plus 20%. Now, on smooth, flat roads, that works very well. But if you're riding on poor quality B roads where there's lots of undulations and the tarmac's broken and perhaps you've got potholes, the dynamic suspension mode is just too firm. And when it comes to traction and all the systems that are on the BMW motorbike, it all hinges on traction, grip. If those tyres are not following the road surface, then the systems on the bike detect the rear wheel is travelling or rotating faster than the front, the traction control system is activated, the throttle response is pulled back down, and you end up with a bike that just doesn't feel right. But if you are in road mode, in the suspension mode, then those wheels can follow those undulations a lot more easily, and that traction control system isn't engaged as much. And out of I've had 3 of the R1300 GSs from BMW, and out of all 3 bikes, the suspension mode that I have enjoyed best has been road mode, linked with ride mode dynamic, because you get that nice crisp throttle response. But importantly, you then go into the DSA setting afterwards, and I turn up the compression and rebound to maximum to control that suspension, which is now running on those standard springs. So let's move on to the settings for you to try, but you just need to understand that in terms of the suspension modes, if you want a nice comfortable ride, you need to be in suspension mode road, and then you can play with these DSA settings. You can go to -2 for a nice soft comfortable ride, or if you're traveling quickly on B roads with bad surfaces, you can, as I do, turn that up to +2, which adds quite a bit more control to that suspension. But I find dynamics just too much in that mode. The screenshots that you're going to see in a moment, I'll put them up for just a couple of seconds for each recommended or each setting for you to try. You just need to pause the screen, take a picture with your phone, and then put them into your bike and give it a try. Let's move on. So what's coming up next over the 6 screens are some more detailed explanations about the different systems and the subsystems on the BMW motorbikes and what they actually do and what these words mean. So I'm not going to go through the whole lot with you because it'll just take too long for the video, so I'm just going to put the screens up very quickly. Let's first go to the first screen, which is the Dynamic Pro, and we're going to talk about engine modes. So this is a screen explaining engine modes. So within Dynamic Pro, we've got 3 main modes. We've got rain, road and dynamic, and there you can see the explanations for each of the different modes. So I'm going to explain the DTC, the dynamic traction control modes. I'm going to explain the ABS-pro modes, and then I'm also going to talk about MSR, which is the engine drag torque control. That's not really explained very well in the manuals. And then finally we're going to move on to DBC, dynamic brake control, and then right at the very end I'm going to share with you, again this isn't in your manual, what the settings are, the actual preset settings when you're riding in dynamic mode. So coming up over the next 4 screens, I thought I'd just take some time to explain to you the very first screen so you can see what on earth is going on this screen. So up on the left hand side we've got some statistics. So this is a rider of a normal level. The focus of the rider is comfort. He's looking for comfort. He's currently solo, so he's just 1 up. The road conditions, this is a setting which is going to cover all types of road. The conditions are both mixed, they're dry and they're wet, and the rider speed is normal. So this is normal traffic speed. So then directly underneath that, you can see that the ride mode you should be in would be road. The suspension mode you should be in is also road suspension. The AVHC, the active vehicle height control, should be set to auto, and the DSA mode, this is the compression and rebound setting, this should be set to -2. This will give you the most comfortable setting that the R1300 GS and the GSA is capable of providing. And then underneath that, I've got some suggestions for tyre pressures. So that's in that vertical column. Now, if you move over to the right-hand side, look at the top section first. So what we're highlighting is that the rider skill level is changing from normal to advanced. Also, the loading on the motorbike, we're going from solo to 2 up. And then the third thing that's going to change is the speed. Now, I've changed that from normal to medium, so this will be traffic speeds plus about 20%. I've indicated a change in the rider's speed because we're moving to an advanced rider. Now, if that's the case, if that you can identify with yourself, then you might want to change the ride mode from road to dynamic. Your focus is still comfort, bear in mind. So we're going to leave the suspension mode in road. The AVHC system we're going to leave in auto, and then we're going to go into the DSA, the dynamic suspension adjustment, and instead of leaving it at -2, we're going to increase that to 0, which is a change of 2, or possibly +1. You don't want to really go any higher than +1. Now you might be thinking that the change of DSA is because we've loaded the bike up and we've now got a rider and a pillion, but that's not the case because the bike has systems which increase the preload front and rear. It's all automated and it's absolutely brilliant. We are not increasing the DSA mode because of the extra weight increase in the bike. The reason why we're going to change the DSA is because of this one here. We are changing our rider speed. So instead of normal traffic speeds, we're increasing to medium speeds. And what happens is, as the bike is transitioning between left and right corners, because you're traveling faster, the suspension will compress and uncompress much more quickly because there is more weight and there is more force on the bike. So in that scenario, we do need to make a change to the DSA mode, and I would suggest you start off at 0, which is +2. +2 change from the mode over here on the left hand side, which was -2. And then the last thing I would highlight is tyre pressures. Everybody has their own idea about tyre pressures. I tend to leave the front as it is at 36, but if you are 2 up and you are going on tour and you've got luggage, it's quite possible it's worth trying going up 2 psi on the rear. So all the screens are fairly similar. There's a standard setup on the left hand side, and on the right hand side highlighted in red are the changes, whatever area we're changing, and then the suggestions for changes to the suspension modes are underneath. Anyway, have fun with this section. So it's Saturday morning, about 8:30, and I decided last night if I get up early, there was one more opportunity to do one more test between these two bikes. Now, BMW R due to turn up at 9:15, so I've only got about 45 minutes. I hope to do this in one go. Cleaning. How easy is the 1300 to clean compared to the 1250? Now, for those of us that have the 1250, we already know it is a right pain to clean. There are so many nooks and crannies, especially in the middle of the bike. When you get it dirty, it can take an absolute age to get clean. And in fact, of all the bikes I've owned, this has been without doubt the most difficult one to keep clean. So how does the 1300 do? But first, a couple of things I'd share, just so you might find this useful. The first thing is I never, ever use hot water or warm water for washing a motorbike, and it's really important you don't. Now, for those of us that have been riding bikes 30, 40 years and more, you'll already know that. When you use tap water from the house that's warm, it just speeds up the corrosion process with all those nuts and bolts on your brake discs. I never use it. I always use water that's come from the water butt, in other words, from the sky. And that's because water that comes from the sky is referred to as deionized water. And there are a couple of benefits. One, with regards to not speeding up the corrosion process, but the second one is it doesn't leave all those watermarks and the streaks, especially when you're cleaning your cars, on the paintwork when you finish. So it actually, as over the years, saved me so many hours just by using the water that comes from the sky from the water butt. So I do actually connect my Karcher pressure washer, which I set on a minimum setting, but I take the water from the water butt. So they're two things you might want to try, because for those of us that have been riding a long time, we all pretty much do the same thing. In terms of technique, we all have different techniques for cleaning. Mine's really straightforward, whether it's cars, motorbikes, pedal bikes, it's the same process. Rinse the bike down with cold water and get as much of that loose dirt material that you can get off the bike. And I'll put some pictures up in a moment. I then use a foaming agent, and I start at the front and I work my way all the way to the back, get in all the nooks and crannies, and use the foaming agent for 10 minutes. That's all I leave it to soak in to that bug and all that muck and dirt. Just helps the freeing off process. And then again, I use cold water with a sponge, and I start at the front and go all the way to the back and rinse it off and get it as clean as I can. Now, quite often with the 1250, I end up having to do that twice, or pretty much every time I clean my bike. I think I do it right, and then once I've rinsed it down, I find that I've missed sections in this middle area. But on the 1300 this morning, I would say, looking at the times that I spent on each bike, this was half an hour quicker to clean. And that's because the middle section of the bike is just so much easier. There are lots less spaces for all that dirt and muck to get to compared to the 1250. So it is easy to clean. So once that initial rinsing process is done, I actually use compressed air. I start at the very top of the bike. I use the compressed air and I start blowing the water down through the bike. I make sure the water's out of those radiators, and then I work my way along front to back, getting as much of that water as I can out before I then finally go over with a chamois to get the remains of the water off of the bike. Now, you can use leaf blowers for getting water off your motorbike. They're actually pretty good, the powerful ones. You can also buy motorbike dryers that use warm air. They're also very, very good. I don't have one, but I have a friend that uses one and he swears by it. That's another great way of saving yourself some time. And then once I've got the bike hand dry, depending on the weather, I would leave it for 20 minutes, half an hour, just to sit and the last few bits of water to fall off. But importantly, you must take your bike for a ride before you put your bike in the garage. It needs at least 10 or 15 minutes on the road. You don't have to go fast, you just need to get it up to temperature, and all that shaking and vibration gets the water that's left in those nooks and crannies that we can't see and we can't get to with compressed air and a blower. It gets it all off the bike, and then I put the bike away. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed these 4 episodes in the R1300 series. Hopefully there'll be more coming later this year. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you've enjoyed this short series. Bye-bye.